Hi there, and welcome to Ancestral Recall, YouTube's most comprehensive series on the history of Magic the Gathering. I'm your host, Eli Kaplan, and today we're bringing Season 2 to a close and finishing off our three-part profile on Legends, the fourth set for Magic the Gathering, and one that pushed the game's boundaries in many directions. Today, we're taking a close look at the Legends of Legends, the multicolored cards. And the artifacts. Okay, we're going to skip over one of the segments I normally do, the price segment, since the really old sets with small print runs have very volatile prices on its top cards. Let's get Brown out of the way first. We start off with a fascinating card in EDH, Arena of the Ancients. For 3 mana, this locks down all legends in play and keeps new ones that hit the table from untapping. This is a surprising answer for any environment where commanders dominate the table. And it's cheap thanks to a Chronicles reprint. I find this card much more tolerable than the City in the Bottle or Golgothian Silex as far as expansion hosers go, and that's how this was viewed at the time. But this is a hoser that affects much more. Legendary lands, artifacts such as the Mirari, nope, no untapping for you. Alabadra's Carpet is a card that screams, this card got to Wizards too late to see print in Arabian Nights, but they had it and wanted to use it anyway. Kind of like Kismet or Whirling Dervish. The smooth features of Kaja Foglio's stylized art adds a lot of charm to this card, and the flavor of evading combat damage just by the player flying above the fray is pretty awesome. Mirror Universe. This card lets you swap life totals with another player on your upkeep through 6 mana, and yeah, sacrificing it, yeah, that's pretty steep. But this effect has only been duplicated in Black Border 3 times, thanks to Magus of the Mirror from Time Spiral, as well as new Phyrexia's Soul Conduit. The Magus keeps the same CMC, while the Soul Conduit tacks on an additional 6 mana to activate, though it can be done repeatedly. But this isn't the type of effect you're going to play more than once in a game, generally speaking. And if you really want to dictate life totals at your each table, then you want to play Reverse the Sands from Champions of Kamigawa, which lets you reassign life totals for all players. That's what I call making critical decisions from a position of power. Sword of the Ages, costing 6 mana, lets you turn all your creatures into a great big fiery blast of doom for your opponents. You have to wait for it to untap though, which gives your opponent a turn to deal with the problem first. This effect got pushed into red after reprinting it in Champions of Kamigawa with Soul Blast, giving it the nickname Kamehameha. And yes, I do remember seeing this card played in Japan, and the guy did the gesture and the big call. I mean, hammy play happens, no matter what language it's in. Okay, now we're getting to the good stuff, the namesake of the set, Magic's first gold cards, the Legends. Let's start off with the ugly. There are quite a few vanilla uncommon legends, and most of them are just overcosted crawworms. Barktooth Warbeard, 7 mana for 6/5? Blech. Sir Chandelar of Eberron? Whatever. But the advantage of these cards is that they do function in a practical way, as legends for Pauper or Peasant EDH, thanks to a special set on Magic Online, reprinting many of them as commons. I'm actually quite glad that Wizards repurposed these cards. Sadly, all the 3-color legends are rare. Let's talk about the 3-color legends. I already talked about the Elder Dragon legends in part 1, but there are a bunch of powerful 3-color legends. Aiden Oakenshield has small stats, and for 3 additional mana, casts a Raise Dead. He's a strong tiny leader, but honestly there are much better effects that are cheaper and less vulnerable to removal. My personal pick here would be Oversouled Cemetery. For the same price, Angus Mackenzie, Fogs. Oh man, that's not even fair. I mean, I like Fogs as much as the next guy, as my well-worn Spike Weaver can tell you, but for Fogs to happen relentlessly? Yuck. Tetsuo Umezawa is the ultimate assassin, working as a royal assassin, or even taking out a blocking creature. He's the descendant of the Kamigawa legend and protagonist Toshi Umezawa, and I do love the ukiyo-e style of art here. Xira Arian, the Jun member of this cycle, gets to, draw a card? Okay, whatever. I mean, from the modern perspective, Jun should not be about repetitive card draw. But hey, the color pie they're still feeling it out and trying to figure out what gold cards mean. Halfdane breaks the cycle with a 1 mana increase, but gets to borrow the power and toughness of another creature in play, otherwise defaulting as a 3/3. That's a very blue feeling ability. But there are more expensive as well as more powerful shard legends. In alphabetical order, Bartel Runax, a giant, comes with vigilance and partial shroud against enchantments. Dakon Blackblade comes down with power and toughness equal to its controller's lands, also making me feel some color pie dissonance in the exchange. This should be green, as Multani tells us, but again, they're still feeling things out. Dakon also happens to have a powerful descendant show up in Cold Snap Corlash. I recall there being some comics about Dakon as well. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to get my hands on them for the making of this video. Gwendolyn de Courcy forces a random discard as an activated ability, and comes with some quite solid stats for 4 mana as well. She seems like a fantastic version of the Matahari, a fabled World War II lady spy. We need to take a break with Hazazon Tamar. This guy is the very first army in a card, showing up first, then soon followed by a swarm of 1/1 Sand Warriors. Perhaps they travel in single file to hide their numbers. But their numbers are determined by the number of lands Hazazon's controller has. And if Hazazon leaves play, the Sand Warriors choose to dissolve into the sands from whence they came. Lousy cowards! Hazazon paved the way for many other cards like Siege Gang Commander and Mere Battlesphere, just to name a few. He comes with a lot of downsides, and 7 mana is hardly cheap, but I've said before that I do love Richard Kane Ferguson's pieces. They just feel so epic. And this card matches the feel of the art. One of the earlier iconic effects of Magic was Castle, giving all untapped creatures you control +0/+2. Jacques Levert similarly functions, although he just pumps all your green creatures regardless of whether or not they're tapped. Also worthy is the way in which he doesn't affect your enemy's green creatures, unlike the Lords at the time. Johann is such a tease. He's 5/4 and can give your team vigilance so long as he stays back. But who wants to play a 5/4 and not attack with it? I call Johann a deeply unsatisfying card. Lady Evangela has an odd ability, breaking the cycle of tiny leaders because her activated ability only costs 2 to play, but preventing all damage in an era dominated by big flyers was a relevant ability. I've played a whole lot of Skyrim, so it disappoints me that the colors of Ragnar, a guy who can tap to regenerate a creature of your choice, don't include red. And Ragnar did not travel from Whiterun to Old Rorikstead. I guess he could be the 5th shard legend eligible to be a tiny leader, but having 2 in Bant is incredibly awkward feeling. This is an affront to proper cycles. Is there a more beguiling legend than Rubinia Soulsinger? The ability to steal a creature for as long as you control Rubinia and she stays tapped is brutal. This legend also showed up in Commander 2013 with new art and a sudden concern for contracts. Being centered in white, not blue, is an odd flavored selection, but then again, we're still stuck looking at Modern with the modern color pie in mind, not the contemporary view when we didn't know what the extended aspects of the color pie, that is, gold cards, really meant. In 1994, it was extremely rare to get a big fat creature with efficient power for its stats. But Solkanar the Swamp King breaks the rules as well as the curve, coming with Swamp Walk and the life gain trigger for black spells, and as an actual 5/5 for 5, I have to wonder whether Solkanar actually came to the set from 20 years in the future. I have a black-bordered Japanese Chronicles version of this guy, just looking for a home in Commander. In my top 10 zombies honorable mentions list, Boris Devilmoon got a nod, despite not being a zombie. Now in Magic, being a Lich counts as a zombie, as Lich Lord of Unks demonstrates. Boris Devilmoon is clearly a Lich, with his disfigured face still bearing flesh, but he's not a zombie. The tokens he makes are just 1/1 black-red demon tokens, but they do have a name, which is a little odd, Minor Demon. Man, Boris Devilmoon got hit hard with the errata hammer. In Magic's early days, there were some very versatile cards, but you pay the premium for that flexibility. Antiquities Urza's Avenger had 4 relevant keywords, but cost 6 mana and got smaller for each keyword you needed. Gabriel Angelfire is the next iteration, getting just 1 choice. Flying? Good. First Strike? Pretty good. Trample? Generally strictly worse than Flying. And Rampage 3? No! Rampage is a terrible mechanic. Alright, so the fact that Gabriel gets no benefits on defense, and that as an Angel he doesn't get flying full-time as a default, is deeply bothersome to me. This is one of my particular pet peeves, Whippoorwill Syndrome. If you have wings, you should fly full-time. End of story. Jedit Ojinen is a vanilla 5/5 that costs 7. The mechanical elements are unremarkable, and actually, let's face it, pretty terrible. But the fact that he has followers in the set, Cat Warriors, and he has a memorable visual design helped him get 2 comics, and even a reimagining in Planar Chaos. That Jedit was properly green in orientation. I mean, he's a cat man. No, Jedit is a cat person, and he paved the way for a much more memorable cat warrior, Miri of the Weatherlight. Lady Caleria is an elvish archer. Okay, hold on. A human archer, the editor tells me. But what's with the pointy ears? While Davina Archer and Crimson Manticore played a bit with range strike damage, Lady Caleria was the real deal, doing 3 range strike damage, and having 3/6 stats meant that she was a very solid blocker on top of her activated ability. At the time, she wasn't a terrible deal, but Wizards soon figured out that range strike shouldn't come in such big batches or cost so much. Another French vanilla legend that got a decent amount of attention was Ramirez de Pietro, who obviously comes from the swashbuckling pirate tribe. Arr! And yes, he got errata that said he was a pirate. Arr! In fact, he's the first pirate printed in all of Magic. Arr! Technically speaking. Sadly, most of the pirates in Magic got printed in Portal Second Age. Yeah, Portal Second Age, this set with lots of cards with guns. I don't like Portal Second Age, but with Ixalan in the future, I think we're going to get a lot more of pirates, and I want to see what they can do. When it comes to broken legends that allow players to ramp up their mana, you expect them to be in green, with things like Rofellos, Llanowar Emissary, and Omnath, Locus of Mana. You don't expect them in blue-white, the slowest color combination in all of Magic. Well, yeah, Rasputin Dreamweaver is here to make your expectations and mine look stupid. For 4 UW, you get a 4/1 with 7 dream counters that can immediately be cashed in to prevent a point of damage to him, which is not what you normally want to do, or you can cash them in for generic mana, which is what you want to be doing. He can slowly recharge his dreams on your upkeep as long as he's untapped, though he can't go over 7. If you want to untap with a likely 13 mana available to you on turn 7, or sooner if you're using mana artifacts, then Rasputin's the guy you want. And yes, it is incredibly relevant to note that Rasputin can produce more mana than he costs. And that's a lot of implications for broken things. Okay, that's the cards. And before I get to the final verdict, let me get off the screen for just a minute or two. One of the things I really appreciate about Legends, especially in the context of current Magic, is the art direction. It's the color palette. There's a few artists who really highlight the medium of the art. Quentin Hoover's work with vivid color as a magical influence against a more mundane natural set stands out, emphasizing the fantastic with contrast. And look at how dynamic that Lesser Werewolf is. The very limited range of colors in Andy Rusu's almost monochrome pieces, such as Tobias Andrian, or Vevictus Asmadi, or Rasputin Dreamweaver, do really feel like unearthed, illuminated texts from the past. Richard Kane Ferguson's pieces of exaggerated, comic book-like physiques stand out with their old-timey color mix compared to the high-grade, as rich and realistic as possible colors that you would see when walking into a 1990s gaming or comic book store, yet with a diverse, rich palette. I mean, at the time, Malibu Comics and then Image Comics were putting out state-of-the-art printing for comic art, while Marvel and DC were still transitioning from their older, much more limited color set. And this sense of age was in the art. Today, with the hyper-detailed, super-saturated colors and technical focus on lighting and shade that current gaming industry art has, Magic's absolutely a leader. The gaming industry has much bigger players such as EA and Activision and Square Enix, who focus on epic, technically brilliant pieces, and despite having a considerably smaller pool, Wizards still manages to be consistently as good, if not better than these companies in my opinion when it comes to art direction. But, with that said, something's been lost, and that sense of history and connection to the past that we see in the art of Legends has mostly given way. And that's sad. Jack Kirby worked with much simpler technology than Ethan Van Sciver does today. And Kirby comics are still excellent half a century later. Oh, and there's still some really freaky stuff in Legends. Horror of horrors, I'll say. Imprison is unsettling as all heck. Antimatic's demonic torment is the stuff nightmares are made of. The visceral ickiness of Mark Teeden's Abomination, there's just so much horror in Legends. And Dan Frazier's cheesy reference to Michael Jackson's Thriller with Quagmire? Oh, come on. I mean, look, he's totally doing the Thriller dance. Blackcard's art back in the day was just so much better than we get now in terms of emotional content. Final verdict. First off, let's be fair to Legends and acknowledge what it isn't. A set designed to be played in Limited. There are no basic lands in Legends, a clear signal that it had to be played with unlimited or revised cards. Limited play was a casual variant at the time and an experimental format in tournaments. Not a tournament format that Wizards was designing for. The Duels Convocation did have sealed deck guidelines, but in accordance with avoiding an undue burden on tournament organizers in an era where basic lands were not widely available, players had to play with the basic lands they opened, and they could exchange up to 5 basic lands to help their deck building. So if you opened a revised starter with 18 lands and 2 packs of Legends, and the land distribution only gave you 1 swamp, 2 mountains, and 5 of each of the other basics, you would have a ton of problems running a deck that focused on black and red spells. It took a few years for Wizards to solve this problem, basically by just printing enough lands and making sure that stores had it so that that wasn't an issue. But anyway, I don't believe it's fair to count Legends' utter ineptitude in a format that it was not designed for. Another serious problem I have with Legends is a trend that it started. While ABU probably had a bit too much flying in it, Legends doesn't have quite enough. 20 flyers in a set with 310 cards seems pretty typical, but a lot of these flyers are tied up in the Elder Dragon cycle, which was far too unwieldy and rare. The rest are petite, unlike a lot of ABU's hefty Skyborn attackers. Flying and evasion in general are crucial to the game's combat dynamics, and Legends' contribution to combat dynamics was Rampage. I have very little positive regard for Rampage, and a lot of cards who saw it first thought that it worked a lot like Bushido, in that the creature got the bonus as soon as it was blocked, not per blocker past the first one. Rampage was a bad, complex mechanic, and the only real way that it even mattered much was as part of a combo with 1 card from ABU, Lure. If you were to read any Duelist magazine or the other various print publications, when they told you about powerful and interesting abilities, it always seemed like Lure was the best thing about green. Well, maybe that was the case, but Lure was a terrible card in an environment with Terror, Lightning Bolt, Swords to Plowshares, to name just a few super powerful removal spells. And that's half of the tale why green sucked for the first 7 years of Magic's existence. Rampage is token innovation, a new thing for the sake of having new things, but not innovation that makes the game any better. -1 point for the set score. Bands with other is like banding, Such a narrow mechanic that saw little use in constructed play that I'm not even going to weigh it that heavily. As a flavor thing, allowing you to get mighty heroes to team up does make sense, despite the super narrow nature of the mechanic. Normal banding lets a bander team up with one non-bander, or many guys on defense. Bands with other is a much more intimate, private mechanic, with much less flexibility, but at the same time, it is a much more flavorful representation of esprit de corps, of close, integrated teamwork between partners. It's confusing as hell, just ask any judge, but I'm going to call it a wash, believe it or not. While most world enchantments, which only showed up at rare and often had unpleasant symmetrical effects, were underpowered and could be abused by both players potentially, the fact that world enchantments get to destroy another existing world enchantment when coming into play was a fresh and dynamic mechanic. World enchantments got further support in Alliances, Mirage, and Visions, and hey, this was a way for Wizards to show planeswalking in the game. Many players created informal casual formats where random die rolls would create shifting environments on the table with indestructible world enchantments. This was a precursor to Magic's Planechase format, capturing the flavor of bouncing around the multiverse. But these formats were somewhat awkward, especially when you didn't own copies of these Legends rares. In terms of the two mechanics from Legends, the two that changed the game forever, and for the better, well, we've got multicolor spells and Legends. Now, multicolor spells had problems with their initial execution in that they weren't costed particularly advantageously. You just didn't get a lot of punch for adding complexity to building your mana base. Now, there were a few very efficient gold cards such as Nicol Bolas, or Rasputin Dreamweaver, or Solkanar the Swamp King, sure, but these were outliers. And Ice Age gave us some really strong gold cards with Fire Covenant and Stormbind. But it took until Invasion, with spells like Absorb, Undermine, Void, and Teferi's Moat, to name a few, to let the power of gold cards really shine through. Gold cards had a huge wealth of design space to be mapped out, as blocks like Invasion, Ravnica, Shadowmoor, Alara, and Return to Ravnica demonstrated. But I'm certain that Richard Garfield knew about the concept of gold cards when he was designing Alpha, and that it was an inevitable path. And I want to argue that the execution of Legends gold cards got them off on the wrong foot. The Legends designers may have put far too much emphasis on vanity cards and not understanding how creature mana costs should work. But hey, other early designs like the Dark, Ice Age, and Homelands, they also had the same problem. I mean, Marsh Goblins, anyone? One of the big problems at the time was that the designers, and lots of people in Wizards in general, were using fully powered mana bases with Mox and Sol Rings and Black Lotuses, as well as the flexible dual lands from ABU and Revised, to test Constructed, and assumed that the players would have access to them as well for the foreseeable future. The restricted list did manage to keep games from getting totally ridiculous, but Artifact Mana was a barrier of entry to top-level tournament play. It took until Mirage for cards to stop taking those loopholes into account and focus on how and when new players would be casting spells as the right way to price spells. That's when we got honest mana bases. This was a crucial turn of direction for the game to be able to grow. What did get started on the right foot was the concept of Legends. In Magic's multiverse, there were many, many Grizzly Bears. Crawworms, they're a dime a dozen. Lords of the Pit, Sarah Angels, the universe had as many as an all-powerful planeswalker could want. But Legends were special. Legends represented a unique creature or location wrapped up with specifics. There were many Crawworms, but there could only be one Jedit Ojanen. And yes, every legend had an appeal in that they were large creatures in an era where most creatures were small. I don't mean the implications of Segothian Leviathan here, though that particular flavor screw-up was heinous. Legend cards immediately inspired casual players and veteran role players to ask the question, what would my character look like as a Magic card? What would fictional characters from other settings, such as Darth Vader, or Masters of the Universe, or Superman, look like if they were translated into cardboard. If we thought of what Batman would look like as a Magic card, no matter what color combination you would put him in, there is no doubt in our minds that Batman would be a legendary creature. The rules for Legends have changed over time, and not in small increments either. Originally, the Duelist Convocation restricted all Legends in tournaments. Why? Well, for flavor, maybe? That's a good question. Eventually, the DC realized that when you had build-around Legends in tournaments, limiting them to one copy hurt enterprising deck builders, and so that deck building restriction was almost immediately dropped. Kamigawa's blocks rules changed for Legends, letting you destroy other copies in play as a state-based effect instead of stopping you from even trying to play a copy of one already in play was a welcome change, and even relevant at times and limited. A lot of people who had seen fights over Lin Civi and Masks era Standard could attest to that. Legendary cards provided a ton of design space for Magic. EDH Commander as a format would not exist if not for the existence of Legends, and specifically for the existence of the original Legends Elder Dragons. They created a subtype of cards that could benefit from Kamigawa's legendary lands, and more importantly, Legends provided obvious marquee characters who would show up on the folded displays of booster boxes to attract customers. They were chase cards, even when many of the first Legend cards were just overpriced, super picky crawworms. And so I count the concept as a home run for Magic design holistically. But with that said, we've got to talk about some of the very powerful, very dramatic cards of the set. Moat was an answer to many creature decks that just could not be dealt with. I'm not a fan of Moat. The Abyss and Nethervoid were prime abuse targets for Dark Ritual, leaving some players to throw up their hands and just walk away from the game when they hit the table. Yuck, I'm out. Rage quitting. That's not cool. The Tabernacle at Pendrell Vale was a prime way for prison decks with cards like Stasis or Winter Orb to add that much more aggravation. Legends had a lot of cards that made creature-based strategies far worse, and not in a small way either. That caused problems for the health of early metagames. Now, I'm not arguing that Magic has to be about creatures all the time. It doesn't. But Magic kept the early trend of non-creature spells dominating creature-based strategies in tournaments going. The set suffers from having not nearly enough cards to enable viable, aggressive strategies. Chain Lightning is a quality card, to be sure, but it's not enough. Legends did not create many new archetypes, it just souped up a bunch of them, and while it had a lot of innovation, you're going to have innovation this early on when you have a set with 60 more cards than the ABU. You're going to find original ideas. But they're there amidst a bunch of narrow cycles like the Glyphs and boring reskins like Raging Bull. I'm not a big fan of most of the powerful cards in this set, and there were some seriously squandered opportunities. It's totally legitimate to argue, don't be so harsh on Legends, the game was new and they didn't know what they were doing. Well, ignorance of good design is a great explanation for many of the decisions that look questionable from the eyes of someone in 2017. But it isn't enough to take the raw, unadulterated excitement of summer of 1994 and say, that's the way the set really was, because in the summer of 1994 we were starving for new Magic content, both emotionally and in a pragmatic sense. The set disappeared in 2 weeks from my local store, and that was it. Reprinting? No such thing. That was it. That's the way Magic expansions were sold then. In terms of the historical contributions of the set, Legends is crucial, even it's unique, because it's a large set that doesn't have a cohesive world. ABU had Dominaria, the most diverse and detailed plane in Magic, though starting off only with the most broad brushstrokes. Legends is generic Western European Dungeons & Dragons Fantasyville, as befitting its dominant tropes, with only a few small Asian influences. Yeah, that description totally fits D&D in the 90s to a T as well. And while Legends did break new ground, exciting deck builders, the power that embodied wasn't in those themes. As such, I'm going to give Legends a 5 out of 10. It's a product of its time when Magic was young and far less cohesive. There's a lot of throwing things at the wall and seeing what sticks. And while some things did stick, and it was a good way of sticking to the wall, it did create quite a mess. Whew. Thanks for watching. Like, share, subscribe, yada yada yada. Legends was quite the project to chronicle. Chronicle. What a terrible pun. Now, that's going to bring this season of Ancestral Recall to a close. I'm going to head back to the libraries to do more research. Next season, we're going to be starting off with Mirage Block. There are some other sets I want to discuss, such as the Portal sets, as well as an overview of the core sets and how they worked, but I haven't quite figured out how I'm going to approach them. I have to try to do it in a way that builds some sense of narrative, and I'm just not sure it's there. And, of course, there are two very notable early sets I haven't covered yet. Arabian Nights and Antiquities. Those are very special sets, and I probably want to save those for a rainy day. I'm probably not going to cover the onsets, because if there's one thing I've learned about comedy from being a teacher, it's that explaining jokes is a rarefied form of inhumane torture. But it's far more likely that I'll also start heading forward in time with Original Ravnica Block. And yes, after Original Ravnica, that means it's time to get to my all-time favorite set in block, Time Spiral! Ooh, I'm excited! In the meantime, expect a few more top 10 lists to tide you guys over. And with all that said, time's a-wasting. This is Eli Kaplan for Ancestral Recall, signing off. Good games, and good luck.